Today we're making some French macarons. They're the little French sandwich cookies made with meringue on each side. A lot of people think that these cookies are very difficult to make, and while they require some precision, anyone can make them at home with some special equipment. For this recipe, you are going to need a piping bag, a digital scale, because as I mentioned, this is precise. You're not going to want to measure your dry ingredients with volume. Volume of sugar and flours can vary quite a lot. You're going to need a mixer with a whisk attachment, and then you're only going to need 4 ingredients and an optional ingredient for this. You're going to need eggs. You're only going to need the egg whites for those. You're going to need confectioner sugar. You're going to need almond flour. I like the Bob's Red Mill superfine flour because you don't have to do any additional grinding of it at home to get it smooth enough for use in these cookies. And then you're going to need some regular granulated sugar. The first step is to measure out your dry ingredients. You need a scale set to pound ounces, not fluid ounces. You're going to need 4.8 ounces of almond flour. Next, you need 6.5 ounces of confectioner sugar. Sift the flour and sugar together into a large bowl. When making meringues, you only want to use the egg whites, and you want the egg whites to be very pure. So I like to use the 3-bowl method, where you have 1 bowl that you're actively working over, and 1 bowl for the finished whites and 1 bowl for the finished yolks. Here's a good example of why you use the 3-bowl method. Separating whites from the yolks doesn't always go smoothly. After you've separated your eggs, you want to inspect your whites. Sometimes you'll find white stringy bits, called a chalaza, that hold the yolk in place in the egg in your whites. You do not want these incorporated into your meringue. If you do find anything you want to remove, an eggshell is the best way to get rid of it. Finally, you need to measure out 3.6 ounces of granulated sugar. Add your egg whites to your electric mixer. Beat at medium to high speed until frothy. Once the eggs are frothy, you want to drop the speed to low and start incorporating the granulated sugar 1 spoonful at a time. Some recipes will tell you to add the sugar at soft peaks, but you really want to add it earlier when the eggs are just beginning to get frothy so that you get a nice smooth meringue. Once the sugar is incorporated, you want to return the mixer speed to medium to high. So I think the egg whites are about done. You can see how nice and sharp and stiff the peak is. You'll also notice if you rub a little bit between your fingers that it's nice and smooth and there's no grittiness left over from the granulated sugar. So now we're going to mix the egg white meringue with the dry ingredients. I'm going to spread the dry ingredients out around the edge of the bowl. It'll be a little bit more distributed when we go to mix the meringue in. So you're going to want to fold the dry ingredients into the meringue. You're going to take the spatula, drive down the center, and lift and fold over. Then you're going to turn the bowl, and you're going to repeat that very gently until things start to get incorporated. It's going to look like nothing is happening for a while, and you're going to be very tempted to mix more aggressively. Resist this temptation because you'll knock the air out of your egg whites and you won't have puffy meringues. The dough is mostly mixed at this point. You can see how it's leaving trails when I fold it. This stage is referred to as starfish because it apparently resembles a starfish. At this stage is where you would add coloring or any flavorings you want. You want to be very careful with both coloring and flavorings because liquid can throw off this delicate balance. If you don't add any coloring, the cookies are going to come out a creamish beige color with a little bit of browning around the edge. It can be fun to color the cookies to match the flavoring you're putting in the middle. We are making a honey lavender, so I'm coloring them purple. You want to add the colors before it's 100% mixed because you really don't want to overmix this batter. This would also be the time, if you are making different flavors, to separate the batter. I'm going to stop here. You can still see a little bit of streaking of color, but I'm afraid if I keep going, I'm going to overmix it. Taylor has a steadier hand, so he's going to show you how to pipe out the cookies.
The first thing you want to do is fill a piping bag with the batter. You want to make sure you have a large round tip on the end of the piping bag. Then you want to line a baking tray with parchment paper. To keep the parchment paper from moving around while you're piping out the cookies, use a little bit of batter to tack down each corner on the tray. Begin piping out your cookies one at a time. The cookies should be roughly 1.5 inches in diameter and spaced about a 1/2 inch apart. Try to keep the cookies all about the same size as you pipe them out. That'll make it much easier to pair them up at the end.
Now that you've piped out all of your cookies, you have to flatten them out a little bit. You're going to do that by banging the cookie sheet against your counter. Now you want to inspect your piped cookies for any really high peaks, and you're going to poke them down. You need a little bit of water on your finger, not too much, and then you just dab it in. Now these cookies have to sit and wait for a little bit, usually about 1/2 hour to an hour. You want, when you touch them to no longer be sticky. The skin that forms will help them rise up without cracking and develop the characteristic foot that you see in macaron cookies. The cookies have rested and a nice skin has formed on them. If I touch the cookie, my finger doesn't come out sticky and the cookie remains intact. The oven is preheated at this point as well. It's very important for these cookies that the oven gets completely up to temperature before you put anything in. I like to use 320 degrees for this. Your oven might vary a little bit. So the first batch has come out of the oven now. You can tell they're done when they break loose of the paper and they come off clean. I'm gonna let them cool on the rack for a little bit and then transfer them to a drying rack. So you can see that a nice foot developed on this batch of macarons. Sometimes it doesn't rise very much and you don't get this rougher layer underneath the shell. And that means that your temperature was a little bit too low. Other times the top surface will crack. You don't see any cracking on this one, and that means your oven temperature was too high. Sometimes this can be off by as little as 1 or 2 degrees. You can fill macaron cookies with any filling that is pipeable. Today we are going to make mascarpone cheese with lavender and honey. I'm going to put the lavender in the bowl first, and I'm going to use the back of a spoon to smush it up and break it into some smaller pieces. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of honey. I'm going to start with a little bit. We can always add more later if you want it sweeter. We're using mascarpone cheese for this. It's a creamy Italian cheese similar to American cream cheese, but it doesn't have a lot of flavor, so it's great for making either savory dishes or desserts.
Sort your cookies by similar size, then pipe in the filling that you've made, and then top them with the other half.
And that's it. Now you know how to make French macarons. If you don't plan to eat all of your macarons within 24 hours, you should store them in the freezer. Storing them at room temperature or in the fridge will leave them soggy. I hope you enjoy making these as much as we do. If you do try them, we'd love to hear how it went.